we will now pass the nerves through the muscle planes of the upper limb. And you have now become familiar with those muscle planes because I hope you have seen the previous videos in which we first had the bones, the joints, the movements and the muscles. So we begin with the brachial plexus. The brachial plexus has 5, 6, 7, 8, 1. And of course above this is 3 and 4. So these are the nerve roots emerging from the cervical spine. 5 and 6 would make the upper trunk. 7 the middle trunk, and 8 and 1 the lower trunk of the brachial plexus. Then the upper and lower trunk would divide into a posterior division which will form the posterior cord. The middle trunk anterior division would go as the medial cord. I'm sorry, the lateral trunk anterior division would go as the medial cord. The lateral trunk. This is wrong. The medial trunk and upper trunk lateral division would go as the lateral cord. This is so because they are lateral, posterior and medial to the axillary artery. The axillary artery. Now, these 3 cords would become 4 nerves. The lateral cord would continue as the musculocutaneous nerve, the posterior cord as the radial nerve, and the medial cord as the ulnar nerve. But the medial and the medial and the lateral cord would make the 4th nerve, which is the median nerve. So 5, 6 upper trunk, 7 middle trunk, 8, 1 lower trunk divides into anterior and posterior divisions. The anterior division of the middle and the upper trunk form the lateral cord. The posterior division of all trunks form the posterior cord, and the anterior division of the lower trunk forms the medial cord. The lateral cord continues as musculocutaneous nerve, the posterior cord as the radial nerve, and the medial cord as the ulnar nerve. So this is one. The second part is branches from the brachial plexus. The branches are, we'll make them with a different color and name them differently. So three, 4 and 5, now the branches of the roots. 3, 4 and 5 phrenic, 5 dorsal scapular, which supplies the levator scapulae and the rhomboids, and 5, 6, 7 the nerve to serratus anterior or long thoracic nerve. So this is roots. Trunks. The upper trunk only gives branches, and there are two branches to it. The suprascapular nerve, which passes through the suprascapular notch of the scapula and supplies the supraspinatus and infraspinatus. Now you should be able to know these names, because I hope you have seen the previous videos and you know the osteology of the scapula. The second one that arises from the upper trunk is nerve to subclavius, and this is called as the Erb's point. And this has got 6 connections, 5 and 6, anterior and posterior divisions, and the 2 nerves, suprascapular nerve and nerve to subclavius. The nerve to subclavius has got a peculiarity, and that peculiarity is that if this is the first rib, here you have the muscle which is the scalenus anterior, behind it you have the scalenus medius, and then the scalenus posterior which goes on to the second rib. So basically the artery coming from the thorax goes around the rib into the axilla through the gap between the scalenus anterior and scalenus medius. Anterior to it is the vein which comes like this and goes anterior to it. Now this is very important part of anatomy. Winding round the scalenus anterior like this and going into the thorax is the phrenic nerve. Alright. And the first rib is articulating with the sternum, and above the sternum, this is the suprasternal notch, above the sternum is articulating with the clavicle like this. Now connecting the clavicle to the sternum is a muscle which is called as subclavius. So this nerve originating from the upper trunk comes and supplies the subclavius, but it doesn't do this only. This nerve doesn't only supply the subclavius, this nerve, it also sends a branch which winds around the axillary vein and goes and meets the phrenic. This branch is called as accessory phrenic. Now this hooking of the axillary vein by this accessory phrenic nerve coming from the upper trunk, winding around the vein and going into the phrenic nerve itself, which itself is winding around the serratus anterior muscle. This hook can cause narrowing of the axillary vein at the site, and there will be stasis and you know that there is a Workhouse triad where stasis can lead to thrombosis. So spontaneous axillary vein thrombosis is the feature of this nerve to subclavius. Then, since this is the upper trunk, when the head of the baby is being pulled by the forceps in forceps delivery, the upper trunk is stretched here and leads to a paralysis which is called as Erb's paralysis. In the Erb's paralysis, there is a typical policeman tip-taking position. The abductors of the shoulder are lost. The flexors of the elbow are lost. And dorsiflexors of the wrist are lost. So these are the features of the Erb's paralysis, and this is called as policeman tip-taking position. And if you want to immobilize to prevent contractures in Erb's paralysis, you will immobilize in policeman stop position. So this is the policeman stop position. So this is the policeman stop position. That means you will abduct the shoulder, you will flex the elbow, and you dorsiflex the wrist. So the immobilization in Erb's paralysis is policeman stop position to prevent development of contractures. So branches, then the trunk, and then the divisions give no branches, but the roots do. So the cords give branches. I told you that there is a lateral cord, there is a medial cord, and there is a posterior cord. The terminal branch of the lateral cord is musculocutaneous. The posterior cord is radial. The medial cord is ulnar. And medial and lateral cord is median. So 4 nerves, 3 cords. But then, if you want to remember the other branches, the lateral cord is lateral pectoral, the medial cord is medial pectoral. These are 2 additional branches of the medial cord. Okay. Then additional branches from the medial cord is medial cutaneous nerve of arm and forearm. Then from the posterior cord, there is an axillary nerve which winds round the upper end of humerus, supplying the deltoid and the teres minor. The nerve to teres minor has got a pseudoganglion or swelling on it. So these are all the MCQs covered about the brachial plexus. Okay, up to here. Then from the posterior cord, besides the axillary nerve, there is upper and lower subscapular, supplying the subscapularis muscle, and thoracodorsal. So upper, lower, posterior cord, subscapular, and thoracodorsal. Thoracodorsal is also the nerve to latissimus dorsi. Alright, so this is the formation and branches of the brachial plexus. Now we'll cover these nerves one by one, the course, what they supply, and how to test them. So musculocutaneous. Name is muscular to the arm and cutaneous to the forearm. Now we'll make the artery and we'll make this coracobrachialis muscle, which is going to get inserted into the middle of the medial border of the humerus, and we'll make the two muscles of the arm, the biceps, and behind the biceps the brachialis. As the brachialis goes and gets inserted into the elbow, into the coronoid process, you will be able to see the lateral condyle of the humerus here, and from here, from this humerus would be arising the brachioradialis. So now we'll place the nerve here, arising from the lateral cord, piercing the coracobrachialis, lying between biceps and brachialis, emerging here, piercing the deep fascia, becoming the lateral cutaneous nerve of forearm. Finished. So what happens? It is coming from 5-6, the Erb's point. So the biceps and the brachialis will paralyze, and the coracobrachialis will paralyze in Erb's paralysis. Okay. Then we go on to the median nerve. So we make the capitulum, we make the trochlea, we make the medial epicondyle and the humerus here. So the median nerve is formed on the medial side of the artery, as the median nerve is dukkha sathi. So when the musculocutaneous leaves, median nerve is formed by the lateral and the medial cord. This is from the lateral cord and this is from the medial cord. Formation of median nerve. It accompanies the artery till the middle of the arm, and then when the ulnar nerve pierces the medial intermuscular septum and becomes posterior, the median nerve crosses the artery and becomes medial to it. So it crosses the artery, and becomes medial to the artery. Now we see how the median nerve approaches the elbow. So here is the artery, brachial artery, dividing into a radial artery and a ulnar artery. The median nerve, which is coming medial to it, will cross the ulnar artery like this. So this is the median nerve and this is the ulnar artery. Now one thing that is peculiar here is that the pronator teres is arising from the medial epicondyle of the humerus, and this pronator teres is going like this to attach to the radial border of the radius, but it is also arising from the coronoid process of the ulna. So the nerve crosses the artery separated from the artery by the ulnar head of pronator teres. So from superficial to deep, what you'll get? You'll get the humeral head of pronator teres. Then what will you get? You'll get the median nerve. Then what you'll get? You will get the ulnar head of pronator teres, and then what you will get? You will get the ulnar artery. So this is extremely important when you are releasing this pronator in Volkmann's ischemic contracture. The operation is called as flexor pronator release. It is also called as Max Page's operation. So this relation is very important. First you release the humeral head, then you see the median nerve, save the median nerve, release the ulnar head, and of course when you are doing it you have to save the ulnar artery, and this ulnar artery would give a artery which goes parallel to the median nerve, which is also called as the median artery. Now then this median nerve passes under the other arch, and that arch is the radial head of the flexor digitorum superficialis and the ulnar head, humero-ulnar head of the flexor digitorum superficialis. And so this artery is now passing under this arch, muscular arch formed by flexor digitorum superficialis. Then as it proceeds below, the artery and the nerve, as they proceed below, they lie between the flexor pollicis longus on the radial side and flexor digitorum profundus with its 4 tendons. Flexor pollicis longus is single tendon. This has got 4 tendons going to the 4 fingers. So this lies under the flexor digitorum superficialis between the flexor pollicis longus and flexor digitorum profundus on the intraosseous membrane, radioulnar intraosseous membrane. The median nerve supplies all the muscles of the forearm. And what are all the muscles? Superficial most, pronator teres, flexor carpi radialis, palmaris longus, and flexor carpi ulnaris. In between, flexor digitorum superficialis, and then radius and intraosseous membrane, flexor pollicis longus, and ulna and intraosseous membrane, flexor digitorum profundus. And here is your membrane, and here is the nerve, and here is the artery. Now it passes in this, it supplies all these muscles except the medial half of the flexor digitorum profundus, and of course here will be the flexor carpi ulnaris. So the flexor carpi ulnaris and FDP3 and 4 are the only muscles that are supplied by the ulnar nerve. all the rest of these muscles are supplied by the median nerve. Now the median nerve approaches the wrist. As this is the lower end of radius, this is the ulna. Here you have a muscle which is the pronator quadratus, and here of course you will have the interosseous membrane, and here is your nerve coming. It passes above the pronator quadratus, and 5 centimeters above the wrist it gives a palmar carpal branch which goes and supplies the skin of the palmar surface of the hand. Then it crosses the pronator teres, it lies under the carpal ligament in the carpal tunnel, and it divides into a superficial and a deep branch. The superficial branch supplies the skin of the thumb, index and middle finger, and half of the ring finger. So it is 1, 2, 3 and a half. So superficial branch 3 and a half fingers and communicates with superficial branch of ulna. The deep branch would pass between abductor pollicis brevis and flexor pollicis brevis, pierce the opponents and supply the first and the second lumbricals. So if I make the first metacarpal here, the second here, and I make the opponents, flexor and abductor, flexor pollicis brevis, opponents, here is the adductor, and this is abductor pollicis brevis. So it lies between these two, pierces the opponents and goes and supplies the lumbrical first and lumbrical second. So we have covered the musculocutaneous nerve and we have covered the median nerve. Now we want to cover the ulnar nerve. The artery, the medial cord giving the medial cutaneous nerve of arm and forearm and continuing as the ulnar nerve. Alright. So now this ulnar nerve is lying on the medial side of the artery. If we make the humerus, here we make the interosseous membrane, and here we make the artery, and here is the nerve coming. It will accompany the artery till the middle of the arm, then it will pierce the intermuscular septum, and become posterior to it. So we are now seeing it posterior to it between the triceps and the medial intermuscular membrane. Now we draw another diagram and show you that if this is the medial epicondyle, so we are showing you the medial epicondyle from the medial side. Here you see the trochlea, here you see the olecranon of the ulna. The medial epicondyle joins the olecranon and the coronoid by the posterior and anterior part of ulnar collateral ligament, and there is a transverse part of ulnar collateral ligament as well, which strengthen the capsule here. Now, the flexor carpi ulnaris muscle arises from the common flexor origin antebrachial fascia intermuscular septum, from the posterior part of the ulnar collateral ligament, from the olecranon and upper 1/4 of posterior border of ulna. And also, to complete it, an aponeurosis. Here there is a aponeurosis connected to the posterior border of ulna. You will find out that one contribution to the aponeurosis is flexor carpi ulnaris. So, we make the flexor carpi ulnaris here. Then around the ulna, you have the flexor digitorum profundus. So, this aponeurosis is common to flexor carpi ulnaris, flexor digitorum profundus, and extensor carpi ulnaris on the other side of the border. So, extensor carpi ulnaris, flexor carpi ulnaris, and flexor digitorum profundus. This aponeurosis. Now we pass the nerve through this. This is called as canal of Cannon, bounded by the posterior surface of the medial epicondyle, the medial surface of the olecranon, and the posterior part of ulnar collateral ligament. The nerve coming here passes through this canal of Cannon and comes to lie between the flexor carpi ulnaris and flexor digitorum profundus. If the nerve gets swollen here because of leprosy, or then there will be a paralysis, high ulnar nerve paralysis, and if you want to decompress it, you will have to detach the ulnar collateral ligament from the medial epicondyle and open up the canal of Cannon. So this is very, very important anatomy in relation to the ulnar nerve passing behind the medial epicondyle from the arm into the elbow. So it supplies the flexor carpi ulnaris and supplies the 3 and 4 part of the flexor digitorum profundus. Now the nerve continues below. As the nerve continues below, it gives 5 centimeters above the wrist a branch which supplies the palm, here. Then you will see that there is a flexor carpi ulnaris tendon coming like this, getting inserted onto the pisiform bone, and from pisiform to the hook of the hamate, from the pisiform to the hook of the hamate, it will give a pisiohamate ligament. So the nerve before passes medial to the pisiform gives a superficial branch which goes and supplies 1.5 fingers and communicates with the superficial branch of the median nerve. And it also gives a deep branch which goes under the pisiohamate ligament, and this is called as the canal of Guyon. So again, in leprosy, the nerve can be entrapped at this canal of Guyon, and you will have to detach the pisiohamate ligament from the hook of the hamate to decompress the nerve here. Then we'll pass the nerve through fastest way to draw the hand. So we'll place the digiti minimi, abductor digiti minimi, flexor digiti minimi, and opponens digiti minimi. Then we'll place the tendons of the superficialis, the profundus, going to the 4 fingers. Then we will place lumbricals arising from these tendons, the 4th, the 3rd, the 2nd, and the 1st. And these lumbricals are flexing the MP joint and extending the PIP and DIP joints. So flexing the MP, extending the PIP and DIP. So here is your nerve. It passes between the flexor abductor digiti minimi and flexor digiti minimi. It pierces the opponents. It supplies the 3rd and the 4th lumbricals, and it ends in the transverse and oblique. Transverse and oblique part of adductor pollicis comes and ends here. So we covered the ulnar nerve. The superficial branch will supply the middle, the little and the ring finger half, and will communicate with the superficial branch of the median. And of course, here you will be able to see the pisiform, the pisuohamate ligament, and the attachment of flexor carpi ulnaris, medial to which you have the nerve coming. The nerve is coming here. So this is the anatomy of the ulnar nerve in the hand, and you need to decompress it at 2 places, at the pisuohamate ligament or in the canal of Canal. Now we take the radial. The scapula, the lateral border, the supraglenoid tubercle, the coracoid process, the suprascapular notch, the superior border, the medial border. Then you take the head of the humerus, you take the greater tuberosity, bring this down, and the capitulum, the trochlea, the medial epicondyle, the coronoid and the conoid fossa. And now we start putting the capsule. And here you have the lesser tuberosity, the bicipital groove, and you have placed the subscapularis muscle here like this. From the lateral border of the scapula, you find that the teres minor is going behind the capsule, so the capsule is sandwiched between subscapularis and teres minor, and getting attached to the greater tuberosity is the T of it, the infraspinatus and supraspinatus being attached superior to it. The sit structures. Then we told you that there is a lady between 2 majors in the bicipital groove, so we attach the teres major and we make the latissimus dorsi wind round the teres major to get it attached in the between the 2 majors, because that's the lady between the 2 majors. On the lateral lip is attached the pectoralis major. Now we draw a very important muscle from the infraglenoid tubercle, which is coming like this and passing in front of the teres major. So it is forming a quadrangular space, a medial triangular space, and a lateral triangular space. Now we make, in front of this, we make the artery, and you can see the posterior cord coming like this, converting into the radial nerve, and the radial nerve will pass through the lateral triangular space. It will give an axillary nerve which will pass through the quadrangular space, supply the teres minor, wind round the neck, supply the deltoid and the skin covering it. So this is the axillary nerve. It will also give a upper subscapular and a lower subscapular. It will also give a thoracodorsal coming to the latissimus dorsi. Now this radial nerve will pass through the lateral triangular space bounded by the latissimus dorsi, the teres, the triceps long head, and it will come to lie in the radial groove on the posterior surface of the, I am making it dotted because it means posterior surface. And this nerve will be accompanied by an artery which is called as the profunda brachii artery. So the nerve and the artery combination in the radial groove with lateral head of triceps above and lateral to it, and medial head of triceps below and medial to it. So this is the medial head of triceps and this is the lateral head of triceps. On the lateral side you have the lateral intermuscular septum. So the nerve will wind around the humerus, piercing the lateral intermuscular septum. Piercing the lateral intermuscular septum. If at this point, as it is winding round, if there is a fracture of the humerus like this, and you find that the nerve is winding around like this from the radial groove, then if you reduce this fracture, the nerve will be paralyzed. So first the nerve is not paralyzed, but if you reduce this fracture without caring about the nerve, it will paralyze, and this type of fracture is called as Holstein-Lewis fracture. You have to be careful not to entrap the nerve at the side in reducing a fracture shaft of the humerus at the site which is directed downwards and laterally. Then the nerve comes here, lying between the brachioradialis. Here will be the brachioradialis and the brachialis. The brachialis is going to get inserted into this. So in the brachioradialis and brachialis groove, you have one nerve which is musculocutaneous and the other which is the radial. Now, as this will be the radius and this will be the ulna. So as this nerve crosses the elbow, it lies on the supinator crest. The supinator muscle is attached here. It lies on the supinator crest, accompanied by the radial artery, and it gives the posterior interosseous branch which winds round the neck of the radius and supplies all the muscles of the extensor compartment. So when you are excising the head of the radius, you have to save this posterior interosseous branch, which is winding between the fibers of the supinator. And you do it by pronating the forearm when you are excising the capsule, because that would relax this posterior interosseous branch of the radial nerve. So just under the annular ligament, between the fibers of the supinator, this nerve passes behind and supplies all the extensors. Now we'll just recount for you the extensors: the thumb, the index finger, the middle finger, the little finger, like this. This is the abductor pollicis longus and extensor pollicis brevis. There's a snuff box here. I'll show you on this side. This is a snuff box. This is the tendon of the abductor pollicis longus and extensor pollicis brevis, and there is a stenosing tenosynovitis at this point, and that stenosing tenosynovitis at this point is called as de Quervain's disease. Then you have the two tendons of the extensor carpi radialis and the extensor carpi radialis longus and brevis. So you have abductor pollicis longus and extensor pollicis brevis this side, and two tendons, extensor carpi radialis longus and brevis this side. And then you have a tendon which winds round the tubercle on the dorsal part of the radius. It winds around like this, and it goes and gets attached to the thumb. So between these tendons there is this snuff box, and as soon as you have understood the snuff box, it becomes extremely simple to remember the rest of the tendons: the extensor indicis, the extensor digitorum of the four sides, the extensor digiti minimi, and extensor carpi ulnaris. All these muscles, dorsiflexors of the wrist, MP joint extensors, and extensors pollicis brevis when the thumb is adducted, pollicis longus when the thumb is abducted, and abductor pollicis longus, and all these muscles are supplied by the radial nerve. The anterior branch of the radial nerve goes down. Anterior branch of the radial nerve goes down like this. As soon as the brachioradial gets inserted, it winds round the radial styloid and supplies 3.5 fingers, communicating with branches of the ulnar and the median nerve. So this is the course of the radial. We wish that you will memorize this course in this video, and then next we will use this knowledge to tell you how to clinically test these nerves. Thank you.